Hi everyone, this is Michael Hoffman at C3 Communications, and I think we're going to get started. We still have some folks joining, but once again, C3 is partnering with the AVI Foundation for our third round of the Jewish Day School Video Academy. So this is the Alumni Edition, and it's the third round, and it has some differences than the previous editions, partly through our goals. So in this alumni contest, we're going to continue to focus on helping you build capacity around video, but there's also a piece here which is about how you build stronger alumni networks, and that's the subject of our first webinar today. Once again, we're offering free training and one-on-one consultations with experts in alumni outreach and video production and online distribution. So if you have not yet taken advantage of those, and if you have in previous rounds, you should do so again. It's a tremendous value, and all of our feedback from those have been really positive. So you can talk about, that's your opportunity to talk about the specific things that you're doing and get some feedback on that. The next webinar we're doing is on August 29th. And then the last webinar on September 12th will be, the August 29th one will be about online video production, and then the last one on September 12th will cover alumni outreach tactics and tools. So here we're going to be talking about strategy, and in our last webinar we'll talk more about tools and tactics. There's a tremendous opportunity in this contest. Unlike the other ones, we're inviting your alumni to participate, and if you win, the alumni win money as well, and that's a great incentive that you have now to get your alumni who you may not be as connected to as you want to be back and in connection with your school. And so you have an opportunity to not just enter one video here, but actually to have alumni do a lot of the work in partnership with you to create these videos and have multiple entries in this awards. So we're giving away $30,000 in awards and prizes. The submission deadline is the end of October, October 31st, and you can get all of the details at dayschoolvideoacademy.org. So with those introductions, I want to introduce our primary speaker today, Becky Vorwind. And Becky is the Director of Strategy and Community Engagement at the Bronfman Youth Fellowship in Israel. And Becky is an absolutely terrific alumni expert and is going to be walking us through some really important information about alumni engagement. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Becky and we can get started.
Thanks so much, Michael. Hi, everybody. It's really a pleasure to be on this call, and I'm quite honored to be asked to share some of my experiences with you today. I had the opportunity to take a look at the registration list before this webinar began, and there are just many of you who have a lot of expertise and experience working with alumni, and I want to encourage you, we may not have a lot of time for discussion during this webinar, but I want to encourage you to take a look at the Facebook page for this alumni edition and also to be in touch as we continue. I will be available for consultations after the webinar and happy to engage in further conversation, but also encourage you to get to know one another, those of you who are on the call. Two other points of business before we get into the details. There is a PDF of the slides that we're going to go through, which you can download and write notes on if you'd like during this call. And this call is being recorded and will be available for replay. And we'll also be having some Q&A time at the end, as well as in the midst of this presentation. If you have questions, feel free to type them in, and Mark, who's facilitating this webinar, will shoot them over to me as we continue on, and I will attempt to answer as we go or save them towards the end. So just a little bit more about myself. advancing to this slide. Here we go. So I work for a program called the Bronfman Youth Fellowships. It's a pluralistic Jewish leadership program for North American and Israeli young people. And for those of you who do work in the day school world, which is most of you on this call, our application process begins with students who are juniors in high school, and our immersive experience starts at their summer between junior and senior year of high school. So always encouraging of students to consider this opportunity. My background in general, I would say my background professionally, I've had a lot of opportunity to think about engagement in the workplace and engagement in people's affiliations. I worked at Ernst & Young in their corporate responsibility group looking at corporate volunteerism and employee engagement. I've also worked in a few different settings related to human resources, and a lot of it has to do with understanding the needs of an organization and the culture of an organization, and then understanding the constituents and stakeholders who are interested in engaging with that organization. And in that way, it's about really finding that sweet spot between those two places. And I think a lot of alumni engagement fits into that same rubric, and I look forward to talking more as we continue through that. I also want to note that I'm a day school graduate myself, and when I saw the registrations, I noticed that my alma mater, Ezra Academy, that there is someone on this call who works there, so a little hello to them. And then I noted here all of the various organizations, particularly educational and Jewish organizations that I consider myself an alumna of. And I think that this is actually something that we're going to come back to as we continue through this presentation. But many of your alumni have many allegiances and affiliations as they go through their educational lives and their Jewish lives. And that's actually a point of strength for you as a school when you're thinking about alumni engagement. It's not a point of weakness. And we'll talk a bit about why that is. Just as an example, in the program that I work for, often we will encourage alumni to gather at other environments in which they are also engaging in. So alumni who are studying at an institution like Pardes can get together and get to know one another, and now they have a dual set of affiliations and overlapping connections. And these are some of the ways that in our community, and I think in your communities, you'll be able to build on the power of their relationships with alumni networks. So today's webinar, we're going to cover a few different areas, and hopefully we'll get through as much as we can. So the first place that I want us to start is talking about the business case and the benefits for alumni engagement, and thinking broadly about what you're hoping to achieve with engaging with alumni. Then we're going to walk through some questions you should be considering and asking yourselves as you develop your strategy for alumni engagement, or if you already have a strategy, some sharpening questions that you might use as you continue to refine and reevaluate what your strategic priorities are when it comes to alumni engagement. We're going to think a little bit about the psychology of alumni. What do they look for, and what are they seeking in relationships with day schools? And some best practices and tools. And then just to end, I have three little ideas that hopefully we'll get to talk through that are fun things you can do to engage alumni starting today. Perhaps not 100% strategically engaged, but certainly ways to start getting the ball rolling. So the first and really most important statement that I'm going to make today is that alumni engagement is not about fundraising. In your registration for this webinar, many of you responded to some of the questions that we asked in advance, and a lot of you are development professionals or wear multiple hats at your school, and a lot of you have responsibility for fundraising and development. We will certainly have a fundraising lens on as we discuss strategy for alumni engagement, but the most important thing, if I can leave you with one thing today to keep in mind, is that for authentic and deep alumni engagement to really be successful and to resonate for alumni, fundraising can't be the place from which you start building your strategy. Fundraising may be something that eventuates, and hopefully it will, but it can't be the place you start. Instead, I'd like to encourage you to really think about alumni engagement as being about relationships. And relationships, as all of us know, relationships have to have a reciprocal benefit. There has to be a real sensitivity and understanding about the needs of the other party. In this case, for example, understanding what your alumni are up to in their lives, what they're looking for. And there also has to be a real honesty with ourselves about what we need from our relationships. So in this case, for your school, what are the things that are going to make a difference if you're engaging with alumni? If most of alumni engagement work is what I would sort of say a heavy burden on your school, that's probably not a successful alumni strategy. That's added work without clear benefits or value. So really it's about finding that sweet spot. And we're going to take a look at some of the benefits and some of the ways that you can think about what your school is looking to gain and what your alumni are looking to gain. And again, I'm going to keep referring back to this idea of a sweet spot. I think that's where successful alumni strategies really sit, is when there's a clear meeting of those two pieces. So before we go any further, something that's really important to take note of is that the definition of alumni extends beyond just your graduates. And when you're thinking about designing an alumni strategy, you may take a large portion of your strategy and focus it on specifically your graduates, and that makes absolute sense, and we're going to spend most of our time talking about that population. But you'd be remiss if you didn't also think about parents of graduates, grandparents of graduates, former teachers and staff. Those are also really individuals who are alumni of your institution, have had a relationship with your institution, and could be very powerful as cheerleaders, as sources of feedback. So expanding your definition of alumni is a really important thing. One of the interesting things for myself when I was working in a corporate setting was that Ernst & Young had a very strong alumni focus, and they actually had a department of staff who worked and thought about alumni. And one of the reasons that they did so was because they recognized that each person who went through their doors as an institution, as a place of business, was someone who would be serving as a representative forever onwards, someone who had the imprint of their business on them for forever onwards, as well as someone who might be a source of referrals, a source of further business, and other benefits that come with staying in touch with people who've had a deep affiliation with your place of business, or in this case with your school. And so it's really valuable to keep that lens in mind, because there's a lot of benefits to engaging with these other populations. And again, I noticed in the registrations that we have quite a few parents who are on this call who are either involved as board members, or some of you just noted had an interest in hearing more about this and a deep commitment to the school in which you're a part of. And I really commend that, and also think that very much proves our point when it comes to the importance of understanding alumni beyond just our graduates. So the business case for alumni engagement. Right here I've broken it down into 5 key benefits, and we're going to explore each together in the subsequent slides. Some of these benefits are going to resonate for you more than others. Some are going to seem more feasible for your school than others. And the key thing to take note of is that these benefits extend beyond fundraising, but also, again, can feed back into fundraising. And so taking the time to unpack what each one is, and I'll give you some examples on that as well, will hopefully help you to have a greater and deeper sense of what you can achieve with alumni engagement. So our first benefit, and really the most important thing that we do as a Jewish community, is having a sense of what we're trying to achieve in creating productive, educated, dedicated Jews. And your organization has a mission to bring people through a Jewish journey, to help them to grow as individuals. And we want to really focus here on what is it that your school specifically regards as your mission and brand. So For some schools, it's going to be pluralism and social justice, or religious observance and meets vote. It really depends on the aspect of your emphasis as an organization, as a school. But one of the things to keep in mind is that in each case, the individuals that are part of your school are people who you've taken the time to invest in with a set of ethos. And seeing them live that out in the world is one of the both satisfying things about being educators, but it's also one of the ways that you can get some real feedback about what your work can achieve. So I think that, in my opinion, this benefit in particular should resonate for every school, but there's still an element of understanding and breaking down what pieces of your goal as an educational institution are most critical to you, because that will help drive some of what you might offer to your alumni. Now, I do want to ask if you guys can take a moment with this next slide to answer a poll question that Michael's going to share with you. And that question is whether your school has a tradition of asking alumni to speak to current students. And let's take a look at what that answer is as we progress. But benefit number 2 that I want us to take a moment to review is really about how can your alumni thicken the intergenerational links at your school. So there are a lot of different ways that alumni may be able to come back into the mix and offer inspiration to your current students. There may be stories that alumni might want to share in a newsletter, or pieces that they've written, or projects that they're doing, or accolades that they've achieved that could be shared online or on your blog. Those are some of the more basic ways that a lot of schools do take the time to engage alumni and to share their stories. But there's also other ways that could be very meaningful. So recent graduates, I know some of you have schools that go up to 6th grade or 8th grade, and some have schools that go up to 12th grade. Depending on where the graduation year is in your school. For recent graduates, you may find that it's particularly helpful to both invite them to come back and speak about their current school, especially for students who are trying to make decisions, whether it's about college or a high school choice. They may serve as hosts when students visit those other schools. Immediately, you're making that direct link between individuals who are still connected to your school while they've joined and added another affiliation onto their list. And that can really also just be a very simple way of making recent graduates feel that their expertise, which at that moment, their expertise is the next place that they're at, that their expertise is valued. And that's going to come back as we then look at opportunities for engaging alumni as they continue getting older. So another example where this may be appropriate, and where the more that current students can have access to older alumni, you know, if your school has, for example, a LinkedIn group or thinks about having a LinkedIn group, current students, for example, a student who is the editor of the school newspaper or who is in the medical exploration club, may want to invite former students to either serve as mentors to them as they're designing a project or a program, or as they're working on an article or piece, may want to invite them to come and speak. Again, depends on who and where you're going to target, but to a large degree, even alumni who are far afield can still be resources to current students. You know, on a smaller level, but also meaningful level, especially for recent grads, inviting them back to serve as substitute teachers when they're on school break, or to volunteer as, you know, guest sports coaches, or other sorts of things where they can add value. At one of the day schools that I attended, something that was a really beautiful tradition was inviting recent graduates to come back as Pesach tutors to teach the kindergartners and first graders Manish Tana, you know, and it really feels deep and connected, and then, you know, there's really a sense of continuity that comes with that. The key thing here is that you want your alumni to see your school not just as a memory stuck in time at one point in time. You really want your alumni to feel connected to how the school is continuing to evolve, and simultaneously you want current students to understand that they will be valued and that they are valued as time goes on. So moving forward, the next benefit that I articulated here was around word of mouth. It's interesting, we're in a funny world right now. We have personal endorsements that take the shape of Yelp reviews of restaurants that are relatively impersonal, or people clicking like on Facebook and saying this matters to me or not. Those are very sort of low bar levels of saying that something matters. But because of those somewhat superficial ways, the benefit and value of somebody having a deeper personal connection to someplace, that really stands out. When somebody can tell a heartfelt story about why a school matters to them, and it goes beyond the liking it on Facebook, people pay attention to that. People listen to that. So it's really valuable for your alumni to be aware of what the school means today, and to be able to tell the stories, not just the stories of this used to be a great place, or I loved that old principal, or I had such a great teacher, because those stories are meaningful, but they indicate a lack of awareness of whether the school is still a great place, or whether it's still somewhere that that an alum would recommend. But if there are ways that you are maintaining an ongoing relationship with your alumni, and we're going to talk through some of those techniques, it's very likely that they're not just going to use the used to past tense vocabulary when they talk about your school. And that can really make a difference when it comes to recruitment for new students, recruitment for new teachers and staff. It can also make a difference. In this case, it really can make a difference for fundraising as well. And again, keeping in mind that your alumni can be parents of alumni, grandparents, etc., that word of mouth extends even further. So that is probably a good coverage of our first three benefits. Michael or Mark, did we get the response to the first poll question?
Hi, Becky. This is Mark. Can you hear me?
Yes.
The poll question, does your school have a tradition of asking alumni to speak to current students? We had 45% say yes, 16% say no, and 40% say we should start. If you'd like, I can also run the other one now, and we can give the attendees a minute to respond.
Yeah, that would be great.
Sure.
That's excellent. Yeah. So the second question here is around who has encouraged you to engage alumni? Is it your school principal? Is it your board? Is it your development office, current students, alumni? And we're curious to see who are the drivers of your focus on alumni engagement. You can respond to more than one option here, so it may be many that apply. But very interesting to hear that around 45% of you are already asking alumni to come back and speak. That's excellent, and hopefully many of you will take this opportunity to add some more invitations into the mix as time goes on. So I'm gonna move to the benefit number 4, and this relates to the way that your alumni really can serve to offer direct feedback and to be skill-based volunteers for your organization. The thing that's interesting here is that it allows you to really tap into and to accept and recognize alumni as adults. By asking them to share their skills, their expertise, you are coming and saying to them that you see them as someone who now can contribute back. And contributing back, again, is not always just about money. It's really also about the skills that they can bring to the table, and the fact that they know your school, they know your culture, they understand pieces of the school that may be really hard, for example, for a consultant to understand, but really easy for someone who's been part of that school to understand. That's a powerful driver, and it feels really good. It allows for a direct feedback loop. So For example, at the Bronfman Fellowships, we have an alumni advisory board, and it's a board composed of alumni from various life stages, different ages, and very importantly, not just the alumni who are sort of the, what I would say, gung-ho, rah-rah alumni, but also alumni who are healthy skeptics about what are we trying to achieve or where are we going. That is a really important part of what you can get from feedback as well. You don't want an echo chamber naturally. You really do want alumni who can also offer some sharpening and advice. And what we found is, you can divvy up how you seek skill-based volunteerism or feedback from alumni. You may want to have a tech subcommittee, which may be an ongoing thing, let's say, for technology advice, or maybe it's a very targeted thing. Recently, we've been in the process of updating our website, and we have a group of alumni who, in a very sort of low-entry way, we were able to ask to take some time to test our beta site, and they were able to give us really helpful feedback. And what's really important here as well with any volunteer situation is closing that loop. If people give you feedback or people offer skill-based volunteer time to you, it's really important to them to see what came out of that, what came out of their advice about updating something on the website. Did you do something with it or did you not? But it's really valuable to have that full revamp. And a few other quick things around that is that you can integrate current parents or current families as well as alumni for some of these kinds of specific skill-based volunteer opportunities, which has a networking benefit for alumni and also is really powerful for the current parents to interact with and engage with successful, committed alumni to really see that their investment in your school has a resonant effect for students who've graduated. It can be also something really small. You can use, let's say, a Facebook group or a LinkedIn group to post a really simple engagement question, such as, we're in the process of revamping our literature curriculum at school. What was a book you read at our school that was meaningful to you? Alumni will enjoy a question like that, and you will actually get significant relevant feedback that may be helpful to your educators as you're making decisions. So there are many ways to engage alumni on this level. The last benefit is around measuring success. And this really has to do with what metrics you want to measure. What to you is a sign of success? This goes back to the mission question, which is, what are you trying to achieve? What are the emphases that you want to leave a mark on with your students? And to a large degree, alumni engagement allows you to stay in touch and to measure what have been the outcomes. In lots of ways, surveys are not the only way to do measurement, but just to kind of use surveys as an example, there's in some ways two types of surveys. There's the kinds of surveys that are about the where are you now, and there's the kinds of surveys that are more in-facing, so how do you feel about us? And in lots of ways, you may make decisions, whether it's through surveys, whether it's through asking alumni to reach out to peer networks, whether it's through just staying in touch with people and keeping track of that, which is something we're going to spend some time about. All of those, you want to decide what message do you want to send to your alumni about the types of things you're interested in hearing about them, right? So for example, if you're asking alumni, do you light Shabbos candles every week? If that's actually an important measure of success for your school, if you believe that it's very important to know if your alumni 15 years out are still lighting Shabbos candles, then ask that question. If it's not as relevant and it's just a measure that you are curious about, think very carefully about what message you're sending to alumni with the questions that you're asking, and how that implies what you define as success, even if that's just an implied definition that isn't necessarily what you want to be sharing. I also want to say one more thing about success stories. Alumni are, sorry, I apologize, I did not switch slides. Alumni are very sensitive to being called out as the stars. For example, when you are using stories of alumni for recruitment purposes, don't just use the same stars over and over again. It's actually deeper and impactful. for you to take the time to also tell the stories of other diverse and varied alumni. And again, this really does depend on what you're trying to transmit to the community. But when it comes to measuring success, you can think about process improvements. You can think about how some of the metrics you might gather relate to your desires from funders or from tuition-paying individuals. And in general, it helps you to identify efficacy. So I'm going to interject.
Hi, Becky. This is Mark.
Go ahead, Mark.
I'm sorry to interrupt. We got a good question
Great.
from Jane Walsh. Please comment on preparing families and graduates for becoming engaged as alumni through the years while they are at the school.
Perfect. So, Jane, we are going to talk a little bit about that very shortly. And if we don't, we will, Mark, please make sure that we do. But it is a few slides ahead. There's some thinking about how do you start from the beginning at really talking about alumni life early on. And what I will say here, just to preempt, is it's less about talking about alumni life and more about showing alumni life, having the presence of alumni at the school for important events, having the presence of alumni on your board or as teachers, having the presence of alumni as speakers or visitors at the school, telling their stories in newsletters. Those are ways that you start to send that message early on for families and for students that it's an ongoing relationship. And it really is never too early to start. That's something that we've found in our work as well. Mark, would you also tell us what the results of that poll question from shortly before were as we move into our next slide?
Hi, Becky. We had a technical glitch. Let me show you what we received, and if we can, I can set it up to run again at the end of the presentation. So I think only a few people had a chance to respond to it.
Okay. Okay. But, no problem. We'll move on. If anything, even if you haven't had the chance to respond to it, I think it's an important question for any of you to ask yourselves if you are responsible for, or if you're one of the drivers of alumni engagement strategy, is really to ask yourself, who else are the stakeholders here? Who else is driving it? Those are some of the things that will help you to clarify both the benefits as well as who to be consulting as you're designing your strategy. So that brings us to our next piece of our conversation, which is about developing a strategy, and certainly asking yourself about each of those benefits and clarifying which are resonant and important for your organization will help you with your strategy. Additionally, there are a series of questions that we're going to discuss individually. One is around, why do your alumni matter to your school? What are those benefits? Who are your alumni and what do they need? What can they contribute? And some techniques around mapping your community. And what assets can you bring to bear? What niche can you fill? Which again goes back to the brand and to the mission of your school. So at this point, I do have another poll question that it would be great to just get a quick answer on, and Mark will send that out to all of you, and it's, does your school have an alumni engagement strategy? Just to get a sense of where folks are at this juncture in this process. So why do your alumni matter to your school? It's really important to know what the goals are and what your stakeholders and who your stakeholders are. Buy-in is key here. As I said earlier, and I'm not going to belabor the point, but as I said earlier, if the work of alumni engagement feels like it's more work than benefit, then there's something wrong with your alumni engagement strategy. So really sitting down and thinking about to what extent and how will alumni make a difference at your school, and how you will have that relationship continue, that's going to be a crucial piece of the puzzle for you. So who are your alumni? How do you segment out? How do you understand who your alumni are? I know some of you who registered for this webinar responded that you've had over 70 classes of graduates at this point. 70 years out, you have people who graduated from your school. Some of you have 2 classes or less that have graduated, and that's great. I think in both cases there are places of strength to work from when you have either a long history of a school or an early place to start. So one of the things to think about is it really isn't one size fits all when it comes to understanding and designing an alumni strategy. You need to take into account the age, the demographics, the location in which they live, and their professional interests. When it comes to age, something that we've found really helpful at the Bronfman Fellowships is talking about life stage, and often life stage doesn't always correlate exactly to age. People who are in graduate programs have a certain set of needs. People who are young families, in this case, a lot of times people's young families start when they're in their late 40s. But they still are in the same life stage as someone who's in their early 20s that's having children. So age is one cut for you, but life stage is also something to take into account. And again, this is one of those spaces where, to the extent that you have access to information about your alumni, whether it's through your database, through something like LinkedIn, through being able to directly reach out to alumni and have, whether it's focus groups or just some catch-ups and coffees, you will start to be able to map out the key questions on the mind of your alumni based on their life stage and age demographic, and that's really important. Demographics, again, depending on how diverse or homogeneous your community of alumni are, there may be pieces that relate to alumni who work in certain fields, or alumni who are from interfaith families, or other pieces of the puzzle that you want to be able to identify. In our organization, we've identified, for example, that it's also important for us to take note of alumni who are engaged in nonprofit work, or alumni who are affiliated with certain movements. There are different demographics, and you should decide which are the ones that are relevant for you. Now, location. Location is definitely a challenging one because if your alumni are not local, you need to make a decision and think about how much work is it worth it for you to stay connected to those individuals. To some degree, the word of mouth component extends way beyond certain geographic borders, but some of the other pieces that you may benefit from having connections to alumni may lessen to a certain extent if you're on the West Coast and your alumni, a certain alum is living on the East Coast still. So deciding the extent to which you want to weight that is important. Professional interests, we talked about skill-based volunteerism and networking. Some of the ways you might map your community and how you can understand who your alumni are. Class reps are one way that you might do that. Staff and their relationships is another. Surveys, online tools. But at the end of the day, you do want to have a real sense of who your community is and a little snapshot of that, which will hopefully help you drive your strategy. And again, I will be available for individual consultations, and this might be the type of topic where we could work together to think through the techniques that you're using to really get a clear picture of who your alumni are. Now, what do alumni want? Well, alumni, again, this is a general statement, but based on a lot of conversations that I've had with alumni, alumni are often looking for a sense of connection and meaning, specifically to places that were formative in their lives. If a school has left an imprint on someone, has been an important place in someone's story of growing up, they want to know that that school sees them as an evolving person still, and they want to know that there are actual tangible ways that they might be able to give back to that school or stay connected. Contributing to some place that shares your values, or some place that you've felt has really impacted you, is really, really critical to a sense of connection and meaning. Often I marvel at, in the work that I've been engaged in, the way that people who are, especially in their 20s and 30s, and even in their 40s and older, don't always feel like they can find authentic organizations or places that represent the things that matter to them. And that's really where connection to a school that has had an important place in one's life can be very powerful. But I do want to put just one word of caution here, which is that Authenticity is really, really critical here. Alumni can sense when something feels tokenistic. Going back to the question earlier, the poll question about who's driving your alumni engagement strategy, alumni have often commented to me about other projects that they're involved in when a Facebook group sort of pops up and then fizzles. Or when a newsletter is sent out touting the achievements of an alum, but the alum themselves never heard directly from anyone at the school a genuine sense of congratulations or a conversation of how can we be involved or help or any personal connection. So really keeping note of that authenticity is crucial. So with your alumni strategy, alumni need to really be able to put together in their minds what your school represents to them and what you're offering for them. I'll give an example. If your school has an amazing tefillah program, an amazing array of choices for davening, that's a place that your students already naturally associate with your school as being a point of strength. So for alumni, that's an example of somewhere where you may want to offer resources to them as they're on their campuses, how to enliven in college, how to enliven tefillot experiences, or when they are adults in their home communities, maybe not nearby to your school at all, but where they may want to upgrade or update davening experiences in their home communities. The better that you have a sense of what your alumni associate with your school, the better you're going to be at designing strategies or coming up with specific targeted programs that are going to be meaningful for alumni engagement. Similarly, if there is a tradition of a huge Hanukkah celebration at your school that every year students know are happening, that's a point in the year that they have a natural soft spot for your school. That's a place where they may want to find a way to, I don't know, watch the Hanukkah web live streamed, or maybe not, or where they might want to be invited and know that if they are home at their parents' place at that time, that's a place that they could come to, or hear about directly from the current director of that Hanukkah production. What are some of the innovations and changes, and what are the ways that the traditions are still relevant and resonant? So understanding what it is that alumni associate with your school is really important. You don't need a dedicated alumni association or staff member to be successful. It certainly helps, but more importantly, what helps is if you have a sense of who is responsible for what within your current existing structure. So if you have faculty or students who have maintained relationships and are in touch with a large number of your alumni, or can be back in touch with people, or are known by the alumni, and if they heard or received an email or a newsletter about that person, it would mean something to them. Those are some of the individuals that you may then designate as resources and as connection points for alumni engagement. Similarly, if you can build easy tools for people on your staff to keep you up to date when they're in touch with alumni, that also will be particularly helpful in keeping up to date on what's happening, and won't be an added burden or feel like it's an extra hat or something that you have to pay extra to a staff member in order to do. It may just become part of their workflow. Now, this little statement here at the bottom of this slide is something that I want to stress, which is ask alumni for suggestions, but you cannot fill every niche. As your school identifies what it can do for alumni and what the benefits are, going back to the idea of mutual benefit, alumni will often have a long list of great ideas and great suggestions regarding how to engage with your school, some of which they might like in theory, but they may not be able to find the time to do in practice. And so you have to also put some parameters around what you can and can't do for alumni when you design strategies, because all too often I hear from schools and organizations that they went ahead, for example, and they built a big database that alumni said they wanted to use for searching and all these other things, and then, oh my goodness, no one came to that database to search it. It's always nice to hear great ideas, but you as professionals need to also determine what's going to be realistic within your assets and your team. Mark, can you let us know what the response to that poll question was about alumni engagement strategies?
Sure, it's running right now. If everyone could take a moment and click on your response, it'll be open for probably another 30 seconds.
Okay. So as it,
okay, great. We have about 80% of our audience has voted. We have 36% yes, 55% no, and 9% I don't know.
Great. Okay. So there's a lot of room for taking the time to write a strategy. And again, the strategy can really start with those classic W questions, you know, why and what and how. That's not a W, but you get the point. It doesn't have to be a super engaged long strategy, but really taking the time to determine the benefits and identify your community is crucial. So now we're going to jump into the last portion of our session, and that has to do with best practices and tools. And so some suggestions, some examples. We've actually gone through a range of little ideas and suggestions throughout this entire presentation, but some specific ones here. Alumni, as a general rule, certainly from the time that they leave your halls, and that especially in today's world even includes your sixth graders, are looking for ways to network, are looking for opportunities for mentorship, are looking for opportunities to get involved in new experiences and exposures. There are lots of things you can do here that are pretty easy to make happen. Again, I've been saying LinkedIn quite a bit, but LinkedIn is a really nice space for getting alumni to be self-motivated to find one another for opportunities. And for your school, one of the things that you can do is driving their interest in continuing to look at the LinkedIn group that your school has so that they can see some of the people that are in the community that may be useful to their own professional tracks. You also can set up direct mentorship projects or programs, something that we do every year that's really easy. We use an online form that's free. It's called WUFOO, W-U-F-O-O, and we send out an email once a year to all of our alumni saying, essentially, do you have a skill to share, or do you have a question or skill or opportunity that you're seeking? And then very simply, we get back responses, and we're able to make certain introductions and connections, and we're able to deepen and have more data about who's in our community. Sometimes it's really as simple as planting those seeds. Similarly, we send a message to alumni who we know are graduating college around the time they're graduating college, saying, are you moving to a new city? Are you looking for a job? Are you looking for internships? Let us help you find those connections. And again, the better and deeper that you already have access to your community, the better you will be able to make those connections real. And it's not as labor intensive for your staff as it might sound, but it's more about planting a seed for people that you as a community are accessible to them. And similarly, that networking and mentoring can also relate to bringing together alumni with family members of current students or with parents and grandparents of alumni themselves. We talked about skill sharing a bit in relation to skill-based volunteerism, where alumni are offering skills to your school, but also skill sharing can relate to the ways that expertise within your school can be accessible to alumni, going back to sort of just as a small example, the tefillah example. I mean, there are many other expertises and places of strength that your school may have, some of which are specifically in a Jewish category and some are in an organizational category, and making alumni aware that they might be able to access a coffee with one of your staff members or with your principal to think about or work through something that they're doing in their professional worlds or in their volunteer worlds. That can be very powerful as well. And then alumni sharing with one another. And lastly, professional development, which again goes to, are there lessons learned in the work that your organization, your school is doing that you may consider offering a webinar here or there, or other events or opportunities for alumni to learn new skills where perhaps an alum or a parent of an alum or a current parent can offer direct professional development information. So this goes back to the question that was asked earlier. Messages about alumni life should start at the beginning of a student's career at your school, and there really are a lot of ways that that can happen. There are visual reminders that you can offer, whether it's on your website having alumni life as a tab on your site and having pictures from alumni programs, or having profiles of alumni, having posters in the school. I think certainly the Video Academy is going to be another space where what you can create with your alumni and through your alumni can also then serve as an inspiration to current students and families of current students. You also might think about how do you match current students or recent parents of students with prospective families, and really, again, helping people to learn about the school through the alumni themselves and vice versa. And communications. So I mentioned to you WUFU. I want to talk a little bit, just as we're finishing up in the presentation, about some of the other tools and uses you may want to consider. There is one more poll question if people want to respond to it, and we'll make the answers of the poll question also available afterwards if we don't get the opportunity to talk them through. And that is, do you have a database for tracking alumni contact details? Now, a database might be your database that you're currently using for fundraising. Might be, if your school is relatively small at this stage, it might be a Google Doc Excel spreadsheet that you're using as a school staff to stay in touch and keep track of people. In our organization, we've been using Salesforce.com, which, as a nonprofit, you get a certain number of free licenses, and it's a relatively easy process to go ahead and sign up for that. As a school, you may not be able or may not find that Salesforce serves all your needs, but it really is worth looking into some cloud computing databases which allow you to have something that's accessible to your team and your staff. And this goes back to the fact that if you want your staff in their natural flow of engaging with alumni to also track and let you know what kinds of information they're getting when they interact with alumni or when they hear about what's new in someone's life, having an accessible database where they can plug that in easily and where there are triggers that can be set up so that whoever on your staff is most responsible for alumni can then see those updates, that will sort of ease the flow of information and enrich what you know about your community, and it will also allow you to then parse out data in a much easier way to see where are people living and other things professionally that you might want to know. We've mentioned quite a bit Facebook and LinkedIn. Again, it depends on your organization and how you might want to use this as a school, but these are relatively easy software that, or not software, but relatively easy resources that with very little tending in some ways, you can still achieve connection amongst alumni, and that's worthwhile to know about. A cute thing that I know Jewish Day School in the New Jersey area does is something that they call Flashback Fridays, where they post a photo from their archives, and it gets people interested and excited. And again, I would say doing that in combination with also moving forward Mondays, or whatever you want to call it, something that also shows the forward movement of your school, that perfect balance between the nostalgia and also the moving forward is what's going to lead to an open conversation. Newsletters, again, depends on your school and what you want to do here, but something to keep in mind is newsletters can sometimes feel one-sided, and so trying to think about what content is of relevance and of interest to alumni is really important if you are sending out newsletters. But something that I heard recently that I thought was a great example was somebody who went to a Jewish day school in the Toronto area told me that when they went back to Toronto recently, they made sure to go visit the new building that had been built at their school. And they said that the reason is that they'd been receiving these updates, these e-newsletter updates of the blueprints of the school and then pictures of, the construction hat guys out there. And they wanted to see it because they felt bought into the process of this school being built and a new building being built. And to me, those kinds of uses of communication that help someone feel connected, even if the likely response that one might imagine is, well, that was not my school, that's no longer my building. This is one of those examples where they were able to reverse that by offering communication that was targeted at alumni. We have a print magazine that we send out once a year to our alumni that profile the diversity of stories about different alumni in their lives as adults, as well as some stories about our current programming and projects. And one of the small things I'll just say about print media in general is that it allows us to keep track of people's addresses, because we get the return magazines and we then are able to track down a lot of people. And because of that, we've been able to maintain contact with around 97% of our alumni. Parents of alumni tend to move less than alumni, although at a certain point they do tend to move. So staying in touch with them is helpful. And also, depending on how deep you have a database and how far back you can go, a lot of times noting certain relationships, certain friendship relationships, is another way to be able to track and keep track of someone. If you know that so-and-so is friends with so-and-so and you can't find the address for the first person, sometimes reaching out to the second will allow you to stay in touch more. So there are a lot of different mechanisms that you might use for communications. But we're gonna end here with just 3 very quick, easy ways and ideas that you might want to use to get started. You may want to think about something happening in your school's calendar over the next 5 months that would be an appropriate place to invite alumni. Again, going back to your little Hanukkah celebration. And send out a save the date pretty soon to alumni to encourage them to consider coming back to participate and to be part of an event like that. So something small, but it gives people a sense that they are invited into the community and still part of the community and relevant to it. Going back to skill-based volunteerism, is there something on your school's set of agenda and goals for this year that you might be able, in a very small bite-sized way, to get input or support from alumni in a pro bono way? I'll use the example again of technology. Is there some small project, even something like how do you make your Facebook group relevant to alumni, that you could actually get a group of alumni from different ages, as well as perhaps some parents or board members of current students to join together to help you think through that kind of project. And lastly, again, I think that it is challenging to reach out and find alumni who graduated 60 years ago. It's not impossible, but it may not be worth your time depending on the goals you're trying to seek. But if you're looking to continue to seed relationships now, something to do that's very immediate is to take a look at students who are currently in college and students who are freshmen or entering freshmen, and try and make some introductions and encourage them to get together and encourage them to send you a photo from that gathering, or to write a cute limerick that's going to be shared with your current 12th graders who are getting nervous about the whole college process, or to offer some words of wisdom. And what you start to do is you start to create a relationship that extends beyond just someone's class. It extends to other years and to the school and the relationship of that itself. And that's really valuable. So with that, I'm going to close just on the dot, and I do want to just say that I really would love to have the opportunity to connect to each of you, or to whomever is interested in further consultation or conversation, and to be part of the Facebook conversation as well. I apologize if there wasn't a Q&A component to our session just now. So Mark, I don't know if there's any closing words we want to remind people about.
Yeah, hi Becky, it's Michael. Can you show the last slide on your deck?
Sure, yep. Hold on one
so
second.
We're going to close. That was really terrific. Thank you so much. And just a reminder for everyone, this was recorded and will be online. You should go to dayschoolvideoacademy.org, and that's where you can see everything. If you're not in the Facebook group, and you're on Facebook, you should definitely join. It's great to network and to ask questions of your colleagues as well as us. And Becky is phenomenal here, and she's available for these one-on-one consultations. So you should be running, not walking, to to take her up on that. I know there'll be limited slots for that, so I would encourage you to do that sooner than later. And remember, what we're doing here with this awards is giving you an incentive that you can offer to alumni to get them to re-engage. And so with that, we'll close. Thank you again, Becky, and we hope to see all of you at the next webinar and on our different online communities. Have a great day.